is Crystal and welcome to my kitchen. Today for my coronavirus stay-at-home cooking, I'm going to make an eggplant lasagna. I bought the eggplant as a part of my big grocery shopping order about a week and a half ago, and I was looking at it in the fridge last night, and it's just at the point where if I don't cook it today or tomorrow, I'm probably going to have to throw it out, and I hate to waste any food. So that's what I'm going to cook today. This recipe is one that I found on the website www.allrecipes.com, and I printed this in January of 2005. That's how amazingly delicious this recipe is, and I've been using it for that long. And although it has a lot of ingredients, it's actually pretty easy to do. So I'm just going to show you how to do it. So the first thing I do is, especially when you're working from home, this works really well. What I'll do is in the morning, kind of like now, it's about 10:30 in the morning, I took a quick break from work so that I could come down and get the sauce started. And this will need to simmer on the stovetop for about 3.5 hours. You could do it for less time, but then the flavor won't be as rich. So I recommend 3.5 to 4 hours simmering on the stovetop, and that's what I usually do. The name of the recipe, if you want to get your own copy, again, it's on www.allrecipes.com. The name of the recipe is World's Best Lasagna. I'll try to put it up here close for you so you can see it. Okay? And you can see my paper has a lot of marks and stuff on it. This is because I've had it for a long time. Now, the recipe does call for sweet Italian sausage as well as ground beef. I have made it that way. I've made it with spicy Italian sausage and ground beef. I've also eliminated both of those. I made it with ground turkey. Today, as I've done a few other times, I'm going to eliminate all of the meat, and I'm just going to do slices of layered raw eggplant in my lasagna. When you're making the eggplant lasagna, the baking time has to be extended a little bit so to make sure that you fully cook the eggplant. It's no fun to eat an eggplant lasagna and the eggplant isn't fully cooked. So that's the only slight modification that I recommend. And then with this recipe, it calls for, you get your lasagna noodles and you cook them, and then you add your cooked lasagna noodles. I've made my own lasagna noodles from scratch in the past, and that's the best way to do it. But when I'm working in the middle of the week, I don't have time to be making my own pasta. So what I'm going to use today is something I experimented with the last couple of times. They're called oven-ready lasagna noodles. You can take them right out of the box, dry, and put them in your lasagna dish, and they cook up beautifully. So there's no need to have boiling water and cook your noodles on the stovetop before adding them to your lasagna. So I tend to always keep these in the cupboard now in case I want to make a quick lasagna, and that's what we're gonna do today. So as I'm talking with you a little bit more about the recipe, I'm gonna go ahead and start getting everything ready for the sauce. So it calls for 1 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. Well, I don't have a 28-ounce can, but I do have two 14.5-ounce cans, so I'm going to put 2 of this size can in. 1 and 2. Okay, so either 1 big one or 2 medium size. Then it calls for 2 small cans of tomato sauce, and I've got 1 big can of tomato sauce. So when I say big can, it's about approximately 15 ounces. Okay. And then it calls for 2 smaller cans, which are usually around 6 or 8 ounces. I think these are 6 ounces of tomato paste. That's going to be your thickener, and it also has that real concentrated flavor as well. Okay, so 2 cans of tomato paste. There's never a real simple way of getting the tomato paste out of the can. I just do the best I can to try to get it all out with a butter knife. And the saucepan that I'm using it's pretty big. You can see it here in the camera, and it has a lid because when you're simmering this, you want to have a lid on it. Otherwise, you'll get tomato sauce all over the counter and all over the stove. True story, that's happened to me many times. So I'm always really careful when I'm doing this to make sure I have the right lid for the pot. And while this is simmering, I'll be upstairs in my home office working, but I will come down, you know, every hour-ish and give it a little small stir. Now it calls for a half a cup of water. I'm gonna use that to kind of rinse my larger tomato cans, just to kind of get everything out of those, so I'm not wasting anything. Okay. Okay, there we go. Then it calls for a bunch of spices, which I didn't want you to have to watch me get every single spice off of the spice rack, so I did that before the video started, and I just put them all in one container. And I'll tell you what's in here. So it has 2 tablespoons of white sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of dried basil leaves, half a teaspoon of fennel seed. And I love fennel seed. I mean, it's literally like just these little, well, you can't see it very well. I'll get the jar, hold on. Looks like this. They literally look like little seeds. These have an amazing flavor. Then it calls for 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Well, I'm out of Italian seasoning, so I substituted with 1 tablespoon of oregano, it called for 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. So I substituted with half a teaspoon of oregano and a 1/4 teaspoon of tarragon and a 1/4 teaspoon of dry parsley. Okay. Then it calls for 1 tablespoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. I did fresh ground black pepper for my little grinder here on the countertop. And then it calls for 4 tablespoons of chopped fresh parsley. I don't have any fresh parsley, so I'm just gonna have to go without this time, but it'll be fine. So now I'm just gonna add all of this in. Okay. And then I'm just gonna give it a light stir, and I'm gonna put it on the stovetop. And as I said, I'll let this simmer for about 3.5 to 4 hours with the lid on. I'll stir it periodically, and I let it simmer on low. You definitely don't want it bubbling away strongly. You want it to just have a nice little simmer. And sometimes I also add, surprise, surprise, a little bit of a dry red wine. I don't have any wine open at the moment, but I might, when I come down and check on it in an hour or so, I might just open up a bottle of red wine and add that to my sauce at that time. And for the red wine, I would probably add about 1/2 cup or so. So I'll do that in a little bit. I need to get back to work now. I'll see you in a little bit once the sauce is done to assemble the lasagna. Thank you. So as I was working upstairs, I could smell my tomato sauce as it was simmering, and I came down to check on it. I was on a call for work, so I was a few minutes later coming down to check on it than I wanted, so it started to stick just a little bit on the bottom of the pan. So I stirred it very carefully. You can't see in the video, but when I took the lid off, a bunch of tomatoes splashed out on the top of the stove, but that's okay, I'll clean it up later. So I added about an additional 1/4 cup of water, and I went to my Graziano wine selection. You know, I love Graziano Winery, and this is another one of their terrific dry red wines. It's called Barbera, and this is their label called Enotria. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but this is the Barbera grape from Italy that they grow in California. And I added about 1/2 cup of this Barbera wine to the sauce. So it had been simmering for about an hour. I gently stirred it. I added an additional 1/4 cup of water and 1/2 cup of this dry red wine, Barbera wine. And now I'm going to continue letting it simmer for about another 2.5 hours or so, because it's been going for just over an hour, and I want it in total to simmer about 3.5, 4 hours. So we'll check back in a little bit. Thank you. Okay, so we're back. The sauce has simmered for almost 4 hours on the stovetop. I had to finish working. Well, I'm not quite done. I have a couple of calls tonight, but I wanted to show you what the sauce looks like. Okay. So it's a very it's like a deeper red color, and it smells delicious. I haven't yet tasted it, so I'm gonna taste it. Always taste things like this before you put them in your big dish, just to make sure. It has a nice consistency. I'll stir it here for a minute so you can see. It's a little bit thicker. That's from the tomato paste. So I'm just going to take a little bit out to taste. Oh. It's delicious. Okay. It's going to work. So now what we're going to do is you need one 15-ounce container of ricotta cheese, and you're going to need 1 egg. We're going to mix those together in a bowl. Need to slice up the eggplant, and then we'll start making the layers to bake in the oven. Let me grab an egg. I'll just set it in the bowl there. Okay, so first I'm going to slice up my eggplant. So I already rinsed it, and now I'm just going to slice it. I just trim off the very ends, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slice it in rounds, about a 1/4 inch thick. That's about perfect. Okay. Oh my goodness, thank goodness my friend George sharpened my knives recently. Last time I tried to make this dish a couple months ago, I could barely slice the eggplant. It's not fun to work if you don't have the right tools, or your knives are dull. Okay, so now I have all these nice little rounds of eggplant. Some people like to put salt on it to draw the moisture out. I find that's not necessary for this dish. We'll just increase the cooking time a little bit, which will be fine. Now I'm going to mix my egg with the ricotta cheese. Okay. There's one other thing we're going to have to do. Normally I would use shredded mozzarella cheese, but I don't have quite enough. But I did have some leftover fresh mozzarella from the sourdough pizzas we made together recently. That's on one of my other cooking videos. So I figure I'll use the shredded mozzarella that I have, and then I'll supplement that with the fresh mozzarella. Okay, so you just mix this up together. This is kind of what will bind your lasagna together, and so that it's not a big runny mess. So you just stir it up. Now the recipe does call for adding a little bit of salt. I don't, I try not to go with a lot of salt, and I already added salt to my red sauce, so I'm not going to add more salt here. Okay, so you just mix it up until you've blended the egg fully with the ricotta cheese. Okay, that's done. And then before we go any further, let me just slice up the fresh mozzarella. Oh, it's so good to have fresh mozzarella. Okay. Just going to start by slicing it once down the middle. Okay. And then I'll just make little 1/4 inch slices in the cheese on the 2 halves here. Okay. All right, great. you'll notice that I did open the wine and put that in the sauce, but I'm not having any wine while I'm cooking at the moment because I still have a couple more work calls to do this evening. So, all right. Now we're just gonna do a layering job. I'm gonna put that in my sink. Okay, so the way the recipe guides us is to first do a layer of sauce, then a layer of noodles, and again we're doing the no-bake oven-ready lasagna noodles, then a layer of ricotta, then a layer of mozzarella, and then repeat. And so in between there we'll do one layer of the eggplant, and I always like to make sure that when I do the layer of eggplant, I put sauce on top of that because the liquid from the sauce is going to help cook the eggplant. I kind of like those together. So before I put my first layer of tomato sauce, I'm going to stir it up. Then I'm going to put a layer here on the bottom. And we'll probably end up doing, I think, just 2 layers in total. That's what I've done the last couple of times. I made this and it worked out well. So you just put a layer on the bottom to coat the bottom of your pan. Okay. Then we have a layer of noodles. Okay. Okay, and for this size, I mean 3 just fits perfectly. See? Okay. Then we're going to do a layer of ricotta and use about half because we're probably only going to do 2 layers. This aluminum pan I'm using here is a lasagna size pan. It's probably about 3 inches high, and I think it has enough room to do about 2 layers. So it's not going to be easy to do this part because the noodles slide all around. Sometimes you have to use your finger a little, but that's okay. You'll figure it out. And don't forget, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just want it to taste good and for everything to be blended together nicely, right? So don't be too hard on this. Okay. My fingers are clean, so don't worry about that. Okay, 1 layer of that, and then a layer of mozzarella. So I think here I'll use some of I'll save my shredded mozzarella, I think, for the top. I'll use do a layer of fresh mozzarella down here. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to do the eggplant. Okay. It's kind of like putting a little puzzle together. My husband and I both love eggplant. I made this for my father-in-law too, and he really enjoyed it. It's always nice to make something for your in-laws that they like eating. I might have to break that one in half a little bit. So sometimes when you get to the end, you break up 1 or 2 pieces to make them fit just right. Okay. All right. Now we'll do sauce on top of that. And you want to be generous with the sauce on top of the eggplant. Because you want all of the eggplant to be covered so that it cooks really well. So I'm just going to use the rest of the sauce here on this part of the lasagna. Okay. And spread it around a little to get everything, all the eggplant covered. Okay. And now I need my spatula here to finish scraping the inside of this. Okay. This is going to be really good. Okay. Now you can see that the pan is starting to get pretty full, but that's okay. Well, that's what we like. Okay, now I'm going to do 3 more noodles on top, and then I'll use the rest of whatever I have left here of my egg and ricotta cheese mixture. And I'll spread that around. And I do, similar to the eggplant, I try to make sure I spread on top of all of the noodle at least. You don't want the noodle to be exposed and not have any of the cheese or the sauce on it. Because kind of like the eggplant, you need that covered so that it cooks well. And I try to spread the cheese all the way out to all the edges and corners. You can see some of the sauce coming up from underneath the noodles, but that's okay. Oh yeah, this is going to be good. Okay. Scrape the rest of that off. Okay. All right, and then we're going to put the rest of our fresh mozzarella on here, and I'll kind of spread it out a little bit. And then I'll sprinkle a little bit of the shredded mozzarella on it. And then we're going to put a little bit of fresh grated Parmesan on top. Yeah, just to have a little bit of a contrast in the cheese mix. Okay. Again, trying to get this closer for you to see a little better. Okay, I just probably have maybe a half a cup of mozzarella here. The recipe actually calls for 3/4 pound of mozzarella cheese sliced. I mean, depends on how cheesy you like your lasagna. I mean, most people like it. I mean, you don't want it. I don't like mine drowning in the cheese, but I like to have enough cheese on there that I can taste it, you know. And that it's nice and cheesy when you bite into it. Okay, there we go. Then I have like a block of Parmesan and a little grater, so I'm just gonna go all over the top here and grate some of my Parmesan on top. And then we're going to cover the top with aluminum foil to cook. So that'll be our last step, and then we'll put it in the oven to bake. And then by the time I'm done working, dinner will be ready. I might even have to set the self timer, the delay start on the oven, so that in case my calls this evening run over, my lasagna won't overcook. Okay. And that's that part. Now let's cover it. I forgot to mention that you need to preheat your oven at 375. So I did turn that on before we got started. So that is ready to go. And we are going to, okay, so it's the oven's on at 375. I'm gonna cover the lasagna. We'll cook it for 25 minutes covered. Then we'll uncover it and cook it for another 25 minutes. But we are going to need to modify that slightly because it's got eggplant. So I think what I'll do is I'll cook it for I'll add 10 minutes of cooking time, because I think last time I made this I had to add 10 minutes. So if you're doing the eggplant lasagna version, add 10 minutes of cooking time on the covered portion. So we'll do 35 minutes covered, then I will uncover it for 25 minutes. And then that should be good. Yeah, I'm just double checking the recipe. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that in. Oh yeah. Okay, and I'll set the timer. Okay, and then when my timer goes off, I'll just uncover it and then put it back in for another 25 minutes. So I'll see you in just a little bit. Thanks. Hi. So the lasagna is done, and let's take a look. I let it cool just a little bit while I finished working. Oops, it's like it's shifting a little bit, but you can see there, look how delicious that looks. And the whole house smells like lasagna, which is wonderful. So I'm just going to take a little piece out here. You know, I like to test it. Let's see what it looks like. terrific. Okay. And hopefully you can see my plate. That evening sun is coming through my kitchen window again. I will try to get this up closer, but look at that. The steam is coming off of it, and it looks great. Smells delicious. Oh, and with my fork, I can just cut right into the eggplant and some of the fresh mozzarella there. You definitely want to make sure that your eggplant is thoroughly cooked, because you don't want an eggplant lasagna where your eggplant is not all the way cooked. Delicious. I can taste all the flavors. The eggplant is cooked perfectly. The sauce is delicious. I like the combination of mozzarella and Parmesan cheese, and I can taste that nice fresh mozzarella in there as well. So I hope you'll enjoy making lasagna yourself. Try making a veggie lasagna. And don't forget, the recipe is on www.allrecipes.com. It's called the World's Best Lasagna. And if you like my video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my video. I'm planning lots more dishes to make videos here in my kitchen while I'm cooking a lot during the coronavirus crisis. Stay well and have a good evening.